No one dared sit near Elias Thorne, a cold millionaire CEO, until a little poor girl did, then made him break his own rules. The big, quiet room felt colder than usual. Everyone gave Mr. Thorne a wide space, like he had his own invisible wall. But then a little girl, small and bright, just walked up and sat right next to him. In that moment, something inside Elias Thorne, something very old and frozen, began to crack. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Because tomorrow, I'm bringing you another story just as interesting and unforgettable as this one. And trust me, you won't want to miss it. Now let's dive in. The glass walls of Elias Thorne's office seemed to stretch endlessly towards the sky, reflecting the gray London clouds like a giant, silent mirror. Inside, the air was always still, always cool, a perfect match for the man who sat behind the massive, dark wood desk. Elias didn't like noise. He didn't like sudden movements. Most of all, he didn't like people too close. He was a man made of sharp edges and silent spaces, a living monument to his own success, and, though no one would dare say it, his own loneliness. Every morning, the same routine. Black coffee, no sugar, no milk. Papers stacked just so. Every email read, every report scanned. His gaze, usually as clear and sharp as chipped ice, would sometimes soften for just a second, drifting to the framed photo on the corner of his desk. It was an old picture, a little faded, showing a younger Elias smiling, holding a tiny hand. He'd blink, and the warmth would vanish, replaced by the usual stern lines around his mouth. He was a king in his own cold kingdom, but even kings can be prisoners of their own making. He had everything money could buy, yet his life was an empty, echoing hall. He moved through his days like a ghost, untouched and untouching. The very air around him seemed to hum with the unspoken rule: stay away. Don't disturb. Down in the city, far below Elias's towering silence, life was a bright, noisy, colorful rush. On a busy street, full of market stalls and shouting vendors, a small girl named Lily zipped between legs, her worn trainers barely touching the ground. Lily was a whirlwind of energy, a dandelion seed carried on the wind. Her bright, curious eyes took everything in: the sparkle of fresh fruit, the earthy smell of vegetables, the loud laughter from the bakery. She wore a bright red coat, too big for her, a hand-me-down that flapped around her knees like a flag. It was a bit torn at the elbow, but Lily didn't care. It was warm, and it was hers. Lily wasn't rich. Her home was small, 2 rooms above a noisy shop, and sometimes dinner was just a bowl of soup. But Lily had a different kind of richness. She had a heart full of wonder, and a spirit that couldn't be dimmed by chipped paint or worn shoes. She found joy in the smallest things: a colorful pebble, the sound of a street musician's flute, the way sunlight bounced off a puddle after a rain. She spent her days exploring, drawing pictures with stolen chalk on forgotten walls, making up stories about the people she saw. She had a way of looking at the world, not just seeing it, but truly feeling it. She saw the lines of worry on a vendor's face, but also the love in a mother's tired smile. Today, Lily was on a very important mission, finding a missing button from her favorite teddy bear, Barnaby. It wasn't just any button. It had to be a shiny, special one. She rummaged through a box of old trinkets outside a junk shop, her brow furrowed in serious concentration. A sudden gust of wind whipped a loose newspaper page from the top of a bin, sending it tumbling down the street. Lily's eyes, quick as a robin's, caught the headline. It wasn't the words that interested her, but the picture: a photograph of a tall, serious man, looking very important, standing next to a very tall, shiny building. She didn't know who he was, or what a CEO meant, but there was something about his eyes in the picture. They looked empty, like Barnaby felt when he lost his button. She grabbed the paper just as it was about to blow away completely. The man in the picture was Elias Thorne. The building, she knew, was the tallest one downtown, the one that seemed to touch the clouds. Lily tucked the paper under her arm, the missing button forgotten for a moment. She had an idea. Maybe, just maybe, someone in a very tall, shiny building would have the perfect button for Barnaby. Or maybe she just felt a pull, a strange curiosity towards the man with the empty eyes. She tightened the belt of her too big red coat and started walking, her small figure heading towards the towering glass and steel, unaware she was walking towards a wall that no one else dared to touch. The lobby of the Thorne Enterprises building was like a frozen lake, smooth and silent. Important-looking people walked quickly, their footsteps barely making a sound on the shiny marble floor. No one talked loudly. No one smiled too much. And in the middle of it all, sitting alone on a sleek gray bench, was Elias Thorne. He wasn't waiting for anyone. He was just there, a still point in a hushed world, looking at his phone, but not really seeing it. He was early for a meeting, a habit that kept him ahead, but also kept him alone. A circle of empty space seemed to naturally form around him, as if people knew, without being told, to keep their distance. Lily pushed open the heavy glass door, her red coat a bright splash of color against the dull gray. The quiet hit her first, like a soft, heavy blanket. No shouting, no smells of baking bread. Just the faint, clean scent of polished stone. Her eyes, wide with wonder, took in the soaring ceiling, the glowing lights, the giant, quiet plants that stood like statues. She clutched the crumpled newspaper with Elias Thorne's picture tighter. She had never seen a place so grand, so serious. Then she saw him, the man from the newspaper. He sat so still, so straight. He looked even colder in real life, like he was made of ice. But his eyes, even from far away, still looked a bit empty. Like Barnaby's buttonhole. Lily took a deep breath. Her stomach did a little flip-flop. She'd promised Barnaby a new button. And besides, something about the man made her feel a tiny tug, a feeling she couldn't name. Ignoring the whispers that seemed to tell her to stay away, ignoring the quick, curious glances from the few people passing by, Lily started walking. One small step after another. Her little shoes made no sound on the thick carpet that led to his bench. She stopped a few feet away, just staring for a moment. Elias, lost in his own thoughts, didn't notice her at first. He was thinking about numbers, about a big deal, about the usual careful walls he put around himself. Then, a tiny shadow fell across his expensive shoes. Elias looked up, his face still and unreadable. His eyes, usually so sharp, saw only a flash of red. A small hand. A small face, looking up at him with unblinking, curious eyes. Lily didn't say anything. She just took another step, then another, until she was right next to the bench. Without a sound, she climbed up, her feet barely reaching the seat, and sat down. Not just near him, but beside him. Her red coat brushed against his dark suit sleeve. The space around him, the invisible wall, was gone. Broken. Elias froze. His whole body stiffened. No one, absolutely no one, ever sat this close to him, uninvited. Not his employees, not his clients, not even his own distant family. He felt a jolt, a strange mix of annoyance and something else, something very old and almost forgotten. He slowly turned his head. Lily looked at him. Her eyes were wide and bright, without a trace of fear. In her small hand, she held out the crumpled newspaper, pointing a tiny finger at his picture. "Excuse me, mister," she whispered, her voice barely louder than the hum of the air conditioning. "Do you know where I can find a shiny button? For my bear. Your eyes in the picture look like Barnaby's eyes when he's sad, and he needs a new button to be happy." Her words, so simple, so unexpected, landed on Elias like a tiny, perfectly aimed stone. A shiny button? For a bear? And his eyes sad? The cold, controlled mask he wore, the one that kept the world out, felt like it was cracking, just a little. He stared at her, this tiny girl in the too big red coat, and for the first time in years, Elias Thorne felt a flicker of something he hadn't planned for, something utterly outside his rules. It was a spark. A tiny, confusing, undeniable spark. What do you think of this unexpected start to their story? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more emotional stories. Elias Thorne felt a strange, uncomfortable heat creep up his neck. It wasn't anger, not exactly, but a deep annoyance. This little girl, sitting so casually beside him, pointing at his picture in a crumpled newspaper, talking about sad eyes and teddy bears. It was absurd. His first thought was to call security, to have her quietly, gently, but firmly removed. This was Elias Thorne's space, and it had rules. Unspoken rules, but very real ones. He opened his mouth to speak, a sharp, dismissive word ready to leave his lips. But then he saw her face up close. Her nose was smudged with something dark, maybe charcoal, and her front tooth had a tiny gap. But her eyes, they weren't just curious. They held a kind of honest innocence he hadn't seen in years. An innocence that somehow made him feel exposed. A button. Elias finally managed, his voice sounding rusty even to his own ears. He rarely spoke to strangers, let alone children. I don't have buttons for bears. His words were clipped, cold, meant to make her understand this conversation was over. Lily didn't budge. Oh, but your building is so big, she said, looking up at the high ceiling. I thought maybe you'd have everything here. Big buildings usually do. She paused, then added, a little softer. Barnaby is very sad without his button. He can't look at the stars properly. Elias stared at her, utterly confused. Look at the stars? This child was speaking a language he didn't understand, a language of simple feelings and childlike logic. It was unsettling. He stood up, a clear signal that the interaction was finished. He expected her to get off the bench, to disappear back into the bustling world she came from. But Lily just looked up at him from the bench. She seemed so small, almost swallowed by the huge, empty lobby. He glanced around. No one seemed to be paying much attention, but a few people at the reception desk were subtly looking their way. He couldn't just leave her there. And he certainly couldn't just pick her up and move her. He was Elias Thorne. He didn't engage in public scenes, especially not with small children demanding buttons for teddy bears. He felt a knot tighten in his chest. This was a disruption, a crack in his perfectly ordered day. He needed to be rid of her, quickly and quietly. Your parents, he began, trying to sound firm but not unkind. Where are they? They must be looking for you. Lily's bright face clouded just a little. My mum's at work. She cleans offices in another big building. She hugged the crumpled newspaper tighter. I came by myself. For Barnaby. Elias frowned. Alone? A child alone, wandering into his building? This was a problem. He couldn't just walk away now. Not morally, even for a man who prided himself on detachment. He sighed, a sound that rarely escaped him. All right, he said, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. Come with me. We will find someone to help you. He didn't say I will help you. He said we. He said someone. It was still a clear line, a boundary. He would solve this problem, logically, efficiently, and then he would go back to his life of carefully constructed solitude. He led her, not to his private elevator, but towards the main reception desk. He walked a few paces ahead, maintaining a small but definite distance. Lily trotted along, her red coat bouncing, still clutching the newspaper. She didn't seem to notice his hesitation or his discomfort. She was just following. She saw him as a person, not a CEO, not the cold millionaire. This lack of recognition of his status, of his carefully built walls, was infuriating and strangely a little freeing. As they approached the reception, Elias was already formulating his instructions. This child is alone. Find out where she belongs. Contact her guardians. Simple. Professional. Detached. But just as he was about to speak, Lily tugged lightly on his dark suit jacket. He stopped, looking down at her, a flicker of irritation in his eyes. Mister, she said, her voice soft but earnest. You don't have a button, do you? But you look like you need something, too. Something shiny for your sad eyes. She reached up, a tiny, smudged finger, and gently, hesitantly touched his arm. Elias flinched. The touch was like a tiny electric shock, piercing through the layers of his self-control. It wasn't a demand or a plea. It was simple empathy, a child seeing beyond the expensive suit and the stern face, right to the hidden sadness he carried. The security guards were walking towards them now, having finally registered the strange sight of the CEO with a small, unsupervised child. Elias had his out. He could hand her over, walk away, and forget this strange, unsettling encounter. But Lily's small, warm touch lingered. It was a challenge, not to his rules of business, but to the rules of his heart. And for the first time, he found himself not wanting to simply walk away. What do you think Elias will do next, given that small, unexpected touch from Lily? Will he stick to his cold rules, or will that tiny spark begin to grow? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to like this video and subscribe for more amazing stories. The security guards were almost there, their faces carefully blank, but their posture clearly asking, "Problem, Mr. Thorne?" Elias looked at the approaching guards, then down at Lily, whose small hand still rested, light as a feather, on his arm. Her eyes, so open and trusting, held no judgment, only a simple, innocent question. He could feel the weight of his own rules, his own expectations. Send her away. That was the rule. But then he thought of her words. "You look like you need something, too. Something shiny for your sad eyes." The words had slipped past his defenses, right into a place he usually kept locked away. He made a decision, one that surprised even himself. "It's all right," he said, his voice a low rumble, to the guards. "She's with me." The guards paused, exchanging quick glances, clearly confused. But no one questioned Elias Thorne. They simply nodded and moved away, their steps silent once more. Lily looked up at Elias, a small smile starting to form on her face. Her hand slipped from his arm, but she stayed right where she was waiting. Elias cleared his throat. This wasn't going to be easy. "What's your name, child?" he asked, trying to sound firm, but the edge was missing. "Lily," she chirped proudly. "And that's Barnaby." She held up the crumpled newspaper, pointing to his picture again, then to a faded, worn patch on her red coat, where a button was clearly missing. "He needs a button for his belly, so he can see the stars better." Elias frowned. "Barnaby isn't real, Lily. He's a teddy bear." "He's real to me," Lily replied, her chin lifting slightly. "He tells me stories about the clouds." Elias felt a strange mix of exasperation and something else, a tiny flicker of something like respect for her simple, unwavering belief. He wasn't sure what to do with her. He couldn't just walk out of the building with a random child, and he couldn't leave her. Not now. "Come," he said, and this time he didn't walk ahead. He walked beside her, his pace slowing to match her small steps. "Let's go somewhere we can talk properly." He led her not to his private office, which felt too formal, too much him, but to a small, quiet cafe on the ground floor of the building. It was usually empty at this time of day, a hidden gem for quick, silent business meetings. He chose a table in a corner, out of the way. The waitress, used to Elias's usual coffee order, looked at Lily with wide eyes. "And for the young lady?" she asked, clearly trying not to stare. Elias hesitated. What did children eat? He hadn't thought about it in decades. "What would you like, Lily?" he asked, feeling oddly awkward. Lily's eyes widened, taking in the shiny counter with pastries. "A giant chocolate muffin," she declared, her voice full of pure joy. A ghost of a smile, so faint it was barely there, touched Elias's lips. "And a giant chocolate muffin it is," he told the waitress. He ordered his usual black coffee. As they waited, an uncomfortable silence stretched between them. Elias felt the familiar urge to pull out his phone, to busy himself with work, to create a barrier. But Lily just sat there, swinging her legs, humming a quiet tune. She seemed perfectly content, perfectly at ease in his presence, something no adult had been for years. "So Barnaby," Elias said, surprising himself. "How does a button help him see the stars?" Lily stopped humming. "Well," she explained very seriously, his button was shiny, like a little star on his tummy. When he looked up, it helped him focus, like a special lens. Now it's gone, his tum-tum feels empty, and he can't see the little twinkles properly. She patted her own tummy, as if to show him. Elias found himself listening, truly listening, to her simple explanation. It was absurd, childish logic, but it was delivered with such earnestness, such belief. He watched her, this small creature, so full of life and uncomplicated needs. He thought of his own emptiness, the hollow ache he'd carried for so long, far deeper than a missing button. The muffin arrived, and Lily's face lit up like a Christmas tree. She bit into it, getting chocolate on her nose. Elias watched her, a strange feeling blooming in his chest. It wasn't warmth, not yet, but a loosening, a slight melting of the ice around his heart. He had planned to just hand her over to the authorities. But now, sitting with her, watching her enjoy a simple muffin, he found himself reluctant to break this strange, quiet spell. He felt like he was seeing the world through her eyes, just for a moment, and it was a brighter, simpler place. What do you think Elias is starting to understand about himself, or about life, by spending this unexpected time with Lily? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to our channel for more tales of unexpected connections. Lily finished her giant chocolate muffin, a smudge of chocolate still decorating her cheek. She looked at Elias, who was slowly sipping his black coffee, his eyes distant. "Mister," she began, her voice soft, "why do you look sad?" Elias stiffened. The question was too direct, too close to the raw wound he kept hidden. He had spent years perfecting the art of not looking sad, of not feeling anything at all. "I'm not sad, Lily," he said, his voice flat. "I'm busy. Important people are often serious." Lily didn't seem convinced. She swung her legs back and forth, then pointed to the old, faded photo on his phone, which he'd forgotten he'd left open on the table after checking an email. It was the same photo from his desk, the younger Elias with the tiny hand. "Who's that?" she asked, her voice filled with gentle curiosity. Elias's hand trembled slightly as he reached for the phone, closing it quickly. Too late. The image had already been seen. A wave of old pain, cold and sharp, washed over him. He felt exposed, vulnerable. This innocent child had, in a single moment, stumbled upon the very core of his carefully built fortress. He sighed a long, weary sound that surprised even himself. "That," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "was my daughter, Alara." Lily's eyes widened, her usual playful spark dimming to a gentle understanding. "Was?" she asked, the single word heavy with unspoken meaning. Elias looked away, his gaze fixed on nothing. She's not here anymore. Not since she was very little. A long time ago. He hadn't spoken about Alara, not really, not to anyone in 20 years. The words felt strange on his tongue, like dust. She loved shiny things. Like buttons. He remembered a small, smooth, polished stone Alara had found once, declaring it her lucky star. He remembered her tiny hands, always reaching, always exploring. And he remembered the day her light had simply gone out, suddenly, unfairly, leaving him in an endless, echoing darkness. He had tried to bury the grief under layers of work, money, and a chilling detachment. He had built Thorne Enterprises into a giant, not for joy, but as a monument to his pain, a distraction from the crushing emptiness. The cold millionaire CEO was a shield he wore, protecting him from a world that could take everything away. Lily was silent for a moment, absorbing his words. Then, without a word, she reached into the pocket of her too big red coat. She pulled out a small, worn fabric bird, faded blue and missing an eye. It was Barnaby's friend, she had told him earlier, named Bluey. Tucked into one of Bluey's tiny wings was a small, round, perfectly polished pearl button. It wasn't shiny like a new button, but it had a soft, inner glow. "This was my grandma's," Lily said, holding it out to him. "She said it was a wishing button. She said if you lost something important, and you kept this button safe, you could wish for it to feel better. It won't bring her back," she added, her voice wise beyond her years. "But maybe it can help your sad eyes feel a little less empty." Elias stared at the button, then at Lily's outstretched hand. His heart, which he had thought was a solid block of ice, pulsed with a sharp, unexpected pain. Not just sorrow, but a strange, unsettling warmth. This tiny, poor girl, who had nothing, was offering him her most cherished possession, not for gain but for comfort. The weight of her simple generosity, her pure empathy, was immense. It laid bare his own carefully guarded grief, making all his wealth feel utterly meaningless. The mystery of his coldness, the conflict within him, was no longer a secret. It was out in the open, witnessed by a child who saw past his millions to his broken heart. What do you think Elias will do with Lily's precious button? Will he accept her gift? And what might that mean for him? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're finding this story touching, please subscribe to our channel for more. Elias Thorne looked at the small pearl button in Lily's outstretched hand. It wasn't shiny or grand, like anything he owned. It was humble, a little dull, yet it pulsed with a warmth that seemed to chase away the chill in the air around him. It was a fragment of someone else's love, offered with no strings attached. For a man who had built an empire on transactions and carefully weighed exchanges, this simple gift was completely new and utterly disarming. He didn't take the button immediately. His fingers, usually so quick and decisive, hesitated. This wasn't a business deal. This was an offering of comfort from a pure heart. He thought of Alara again, of her own small, trusting hand. He felt a lump form in his throat, tight and painful. "Lily," he said, his voice rough. He looked into her eyes, which were still watching him with such quiet understanding. "Are you sure? This was your grandma's?" Lily nodded firmly. "Grandma said sharing makes good things grow. And you look like you need something good to grow inside you, mister." With a slow, deliberate movement, Elias reached out and gently took the button. It felt warm in his palm, a stark contrast to the cold metal of his phone or the expensive pen he usually held. He closed his fingers around it, letting the warmth soak into his skin. "Thank you, Lily," he said, and the words felt honest, deeply felt. It was the first true gratitude he'd expressed in years. Over the next few hours, a strange, beautiful routine began to form. Elias, instead of rushing off to his meeting, found himself simply being with Lily. He listened as she told him stories about Barnaby and Bluey, about the clouds that looked like giant rabbits, and the way the city lights twinkled like spilled glitter at night. He even found himself smiling, a real, unforced smile that reached his eyes, something his assistants hadn't seen in a very long time. He learned that Lily lived with her busy mother, who worked long hours. He learned that Lily often came to the market alone, and sometimes, if her mom was late, she'd wait in places she thought were safe, like this quiet grand lobby. He didn't judge. He simply listened, a part of him realizing how truly alone this spirited child often was, despite her bright outlook. In return, Elias found himself sharing small, almost forgotten details about his own life. Not about his business or his wealth, but about simpler things. He spoke of a time when he was a boy, and he'd loved building things with wooden blocks. He even told her a short, silly story about a dog he'd had as a child, a loyal, clumsy creature named Buster. Lily listened with rapt attention, her eyes never leaving his face. She didn't see the cold CEO. She saw a man telling a story, just like Barnaby told her stories about the clouds. They shared another muffin, and Elias, to his own surprise, found himself enjoying it. He even picked a small piece of chocolate from Lily's cheek with his thumb, a gesture so gentle and natural it stunned him. The rigid lines of his face softened. The deep-set sadness in his eyes lessened, replaced by a glint of something akin to peace. The weight of his grief was still there, a constant shadow, but in Lily's presence, the shadow felt a little less dark, a little less overwhelming. He wasn't ready to talk about Alara more deeply, not yet. But Lily's simple presence, her innocent questions, and the warmth of the pearl button nestled in his pocket, created a space where healing felt not just possible, but even desirable. It felt like a fragile, precious thing, this bond. A secret garden blooming in the cold, silent halls of his life. Think about a time when a simple act of kindness or connection from someone unexpected helped you feel a little lighter. Share your experience in the comments below. And please remember to subscribe for more heartwarming stories like this one. The unexpected peace that had settled around Elias and Lily was a fragile thing, like a bubble that could burst at any moment. And it did. Their quiet time in the cafe was interrupted by a sharp, authoritative voice. "Lily, there you are." Elias looked up to see a woman standing over their table, her face a mix of relief and sharp anger. She was thin, her hair pulled back tightly, and she wore a cleaner's uniform. It was Lily's mother, Maria. Her eyes, usually tired, were now blazing. Maria's gaze swept over Elias, taking in his expensive suit, the secluded cafe, and her daughter sitting so comfortably beside him. Misunderstanding flared instantly in her eyes. "Lily, what are you doing here? And with him?" Her voice was low but fierce, filled with fear and protectiveness. Lily, her smile fading, slid off the chair. "Mom, I was just getting Barnaby a button, and Mr. Thorne was helping." "Helping?" Maria scoffed, her eyes narrowing at Elias. "You think I don't know who you are, Mr. Thorne? The big CEO. What business do you have with my daughter?" Her voice rose, attracting the attention of the few people in the cafe. She imagined the worst, a powerful man taking advantage of her innocent, trusting child. The vast difference in their worlds, in their power, suddenly felt like a massive, unbridgeable chasm. Elias stood up, trying to explain, to calm her. "Madam, there's been a misunderstanding. Your daughter simply approached me. She was alone. I was merely ensuring her safety." He tried to sound calm, logical, but Maria wasn't listening. "Ensuring her safety?" Maria laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Or amusing yourself? You think I don't know what people like you do. You live in your towers, looking down on the rest of us. My daughter is not a plaything." Her voice cracked with emotion, fueled by a lifetime of struggling, of feeling invisible to people like Elias. Elias felt a cold rage begin to simmer. He, Elias Thorne, being accused like this? He had done a kindness, however small and unexpected. His own carefully controlled anger, usually reserved for boardrooms, began to rise. "You are mistaken, madam," he said, his voice dropping to the chilling tone his employees knew well. "I assure you, I had no ill intentions. I was simply helping a child." "Helping?" Maria echoed, stepping between Elias and Lily, shielding her daughter with her body. "Leave us alone, Mr. Thorne. Stay away from my daughter. Stay away from us." Lily, caught between her mother's fury and Elias's rigid coldness, felt tears prick her eyes. The happy bubble had burst. Her mother looked scared and angry, and Mr. Thorne looked like the cold, distant man from the newspaper again. The warmth that had been growing felt like it was freezing over. Elias watched Maria pull Lily away, her fierce protectiveness a wall he couldn't break through. He saw Lily's small, sad face looking back at him over her mother's shoulder, a mix of confusion and hurt in her wide eyes. The pearl button felt heavy and cold in his pocket. He had tried, in his own awkward way, to connect. But Maria's words, her assumptions, had cut him deep. They echoed the very fears he had about being misunderstood, about being seen only for his wealth and not for the man beneath it. The fragile bond, the unexpected warmth, seemed to shatter into a million icy pieces, leaving Elias Thorne more isolated, more profoundly alone than he had ever been. He stood there, silent and rigid, watching them go, the heavy silence of the cafe closing in around him once more. He questioned if he had ever truly been worthy of connection, if his past defined him too much to ever escape. What do you think Elias will do now that Lily and her mother are gone? Will he give up on the connection, or will something make him fight for it? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to see how this story ends. The days that followed Maria's furious outburst were the coldest Elias Thorne had ever known, colder even than the 2 decades he had spent building his icy shell. The usual hum of his vast office, the efficient click of keyboards, the low murmur of calls, it all felt like static, meaningless noise. He went through the motions of his work, signing papers, attending meetings, but his mind kept replaying Maria's angry face, Lily's confused, hurt eyes. Her words, "My daughter is not a plaything," echoed in the empty spaces of his mind, hitting him harder than any financial loss ever could. He had meant well. Or, he had thought he meant well. He had simply responded to a child's innocent need. But Maria's reaction had stripped bare his own deepest fear. That no matter how much good he tried to do, his past, his wealth, his very being, would always be seen through a lens of suspicion and distrust. He was the cold millionaire CEO, and that label, he realized now, felt like a brand. The small pearl button Lily had given him was still in his pocket. He pulled it out sometimes, turning it over and over in his fingers. It felt less like a wish for comfort and more like a reminder of what he had lost. Not just Alara, but the capacity for simple, genuine human connection. He missed Lily's bright questions, her innocent way of seeing the world. He missed the unexpected lightness he felt when she was near. His grief for Alara, which had been a dull, constant ache, now felt sharper, intertwined with the fresh pain of Lily's absence. He had pushed away the world for so long, and now, when a tiny piece of the world finally reached out, he had allowed it to be snatched away. Meanwhile, Lily was just as lost. Her mother, Maria, had been frantic after finding her. Maria loved Lily fiercely, and the thought of her daughter being alone with such a powerful, unfamiliar man had terrified her. She had explained in firm, hushed tones that they needed to be careful, that some people were different, and that Lily should never, ever go into big, shiny buildings alone again. Lily understood her mum was scared, but she didn't understand why Mr. Thorne was suddenly bad. He hadn't been bad. He had given her a muffin, and he had listened to her stories, and his eyes hadn't looked sad when he smiled. She missed him and the quiet comfort of their shared time. She missed the man who had briefly understood about missing buttons and sad eyes. She looked at Barnaby, whose missing buttons still left him feeling empty. One evening, as Elias sat alone in his vast penthouse, staring out at the twinkling lights of London, the pearl button clutched in his hand, a thought struck him. Maria's anger was born of fear, a mother's fierce protection. It wasn't a personal attack on him as a person, but on what he represented to her, the unfeeling, powerful world that often crushed people like her. He had reacted with his usual defense, coldness, detachment, pride. But what if he chose differently? What if he chose vulnerability instead? It was a terrifying thought. It meant stepping outside his fortress, admitting his own loneliness, risking more pain. But then, he looked at the pearl button again. Lily hadn't given it to him for a transaction. She had given it for comfort, for connection. He couldn't get Lily's words out of his head. You look like you need something, too. Something shiny for your sad eyes. He had a choice. He could sink back into his isolation, let Maria's words reaffirm his cynical view of the world. Or he could reach out, truly reach out, not as a CEO, but as a person, and try to mend the fragile bond that had been so cruelly broken. It was a choice between continuing to guard his broken heart, or taking the terrifying risk of allowing it to heal. His hand trembled, but this time, not from fear, but from a growing resolve. He knew where Lily's mother worked. He had his security team check. It was a cleaner's job, late hours, in a building not far from his own tower. He knew what he had to do. It was a strange, unsettling feeling, this need to connect, this yearning for a simple, honest interaction. But it was a feeling he could no longer ignore. He would go to them, not in his usual powerful way, but with a humility he hadn't shown in decades. What do you think Elias's next step will be to reach out to Lily and Maria? How might he approach them to show he truly wants to mend things? Share your ideas in the comments below. And if you're enjoying the journey of this story, please subscribe to our channel for more emotional tales. The night air in London was cool and damp as Elias Thorne stood, for the first time in years, outside a building that wasn't his own. This wasn't a towering office block, but a modest, older building where cleaning crews worked late into the night. His luxury car was parked discreetly down the street, and his usual entourage was nowhere in sight. He wore a simple, dark coat, not his usual impeccably tailored suit, and for once he felt no sense of power, only a deep, nervous humility. In his pocket, he clutched the small pearl button Lily had given him. He saw her first. Lily, in her too big red coat, was waiting by a side entrance, swinging her legs, a small, weary figure in the dim light. Maria soon appeared, pushing a heavy cleaning cart, her shoulders slumped with tiredness. As Lily ran to her, Maria wrapped an arm around her daughter, a familiar gesture of fierce protection. Elias took a deep breath, steeling himself. This was it. He walked towards them, slowly, deliberately. Maria saw him first. Her body tensed, and she pulled Lily closer. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice tight with suspicion. Elias stopped a few feet away, making sure his hands were visible, empty. "Madam," he began, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "Maria, I have come to apologize." Maria's eyes narrowed. An apology? From a man like him? "For what?" she challenged, her voice still sharp. "For everything," Elias said, his gaze flicking to Lily, then back to Maria. "For my coldness. For my assumption that I could simply handle your daughter without understanding. For allowing you to believe the worst. I was wrong. My intentions were pure, but my actions, my distance, made them seem otherwise." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the pearl button, holding it out. "Lily gave me this. She said it was for my sad eyes." His voice cracked slightly on the last words. "She saw something in me that no one else has seen in a very long time." Maria looked from the button to Elias's face. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something she hadn't expected, vulnerability. He looked tired, yes, but also truly sorry. And Lily, sensing the shift, gently tugged on her mother's hand. "Mum, Mr. Thorne was nice. He gave me a muffin." Elias looked at Lily, then back at Maria. "I lost my daughter, Alara, many years ago. She was just a little girl, full of light like Lily." The words came out in a rush, raw and unguarded. "I built walls around myself, not to be cold, but to protect a heart that was already shattered. Lily, she reminded me what it felt like to truly connect. And when you were angry, I let my own fear of being misunderstood, my own pride, make me retreat. I should have explained. I should have listened." He extended the button further. "This button, it means a great deal to me now. But I want to return it. It belongs with Lily, with Barnaby. And I hope you might allow me to make things right. Not as a CEO, but as a man who simply wants to be less alone." Silence hung in the air, broken only by the distant city hum. Maria studied his face, seeing the genuine pain in his eyes, the sincere regret. She saw a man, stripped of his usual power, offering a piece of his broken heart. She thought of Lily's simple trust, and how important it was to her daughter. Finally, slowly, Maria nodded. "All right, Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice softer now, tinged with a weary understanding. "All right." She took the button from his hand. "Thank you for being honest." A wave of relief washed over Elias, so profound it nearly brought him to his knees. "Perhaps," he ventured, a tentative hope in his voice, "perhaps I could help Barnaby find a new button. A very shiny one. And perhaps we could all share a muffin sometime." Lily's face lit up, a brilliant smile chasing away the last of her sadness. "Really? A super shiny one?" Elias Thorne looked at Lily, then at Maria. For the first time in 20 years, he felt a genuine, unburdened warmth spread through his chest. It wasn't the kind of love he'd lost, but a new, unexpected kind. A love that had bloomed from the most unlikely of encounters, reminding him that even the coldest hearts could thaw, and that true connection could break through any wall. The man who no one dared sit near had, indeed, broken his own rules. Not for profit, but for the simple, profound joy of not being alone. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.